This video is sponsored by Squarespace, but I'll tell you more about them later. Over the last while, I've been working with some artists who have been sending through some of their works for critique, so I thought I'd go through some of those, highlight some common areas of focus, and kind of condense that all into a video for you. If you're new here, my name is Jono, and I do pencil drawings. So the first section, larger shapes. This is such a big one. This is one that I almost always encounter. I often find this with my own practice that I forget to focus on the larger shapes. I get caught up in those details, and when I look back at it, the work looks a bit flat. So here we're just going back into some of the critiques where we've been focusing on remembering to build those larger shapes. Yeah, this is beautiful. Your work is fantastic. Again, I think paying attention to where the light is coming from, really trying to get that strong distinction is going to be super important. So let's just add a little bit here, see what it looks like. Get a bit of a shadow. Look, I mean, this is super rough. I'm using a massive brush and it's not very effective, but it does give you, again, it gives you a bit of an idea of how I think you should be viewing your work, always looking for an opportunity to see where the light is coming, enhance that, exaggerate that a little bit. I want to quickly take a look at your reference. What I love about what you've done with this drawing is you've paid a lot of attention to where your highlights are and your midtones, and you've managed to capture that light really beautifully on the fur. But there are some opportunities with the fur over here. So if we zoom in, there's opportunities here to kind of get those smaller shapes and use those to create the texture. Okay, so I just want to show you that area there quickly. So what I'm looking for are the larger shapes in that eyebrow, which kind of just helps you feel like those smaller marks are actually hairs, rather than it looking like a very smooth transition. So I think just pay attention to your midtones there. It's actually quite rare that you find the finer details are all hitting perfectly. It's just that midtone area that requires a bit of attention. The last thing I want to show you here is just your toning on the eyes here, and then actually also across the forehead there as well. So as you can see, there's quite a nice dark tone over here, and I would try and carry that across, all the way across the brow here. So it gets really light, and then that alludes to a highlight which there isn't exactly a highlight there. So just with spending a little bit of time with this, what I've noticed is there's definitely a very beautiful, strong light coming in from the left-hand side, and there's opportunities that we can grab. So this highlight on the nose is a perfect opportunity to try and get a really nice texture and a nice illusion that pencil offers us. And if we remove this layer, it starts to become kind of hard to distinguish which side is the lighter side. So just putting this back quick, and I think the illusion will really come to life nicely when you see the highlights actually pop in comparison to these areas. So what we're trying to do is to darken as much of the drawing as possible while leaving the highlights as crisp as possible, and that really kind of helps you offset the shortfalls of graphite. Next one is reference photos. So over here we're talking about taking and editing your own reference photos. So not all of us have the opportunity to take our own reference photos, but with cell phone cameras today, it's actually really accessible to take our own reference photos. I don't know how often you've spent scrolling through Pinterest trying to find the right reference photo, but it can be a nightmare of a task, and then you also have to ask for permission from the photographer, and it's a whole thing. So being able to take your own reference photos is a crucial one. You can also really get involved in the lighting and light it in a way that's really going to bring out your pencil work. So in these ones, we're talking a little bit about the reference photo side. A big part of drawing is understanding the medium, knowing that sometimes drawings tend to look flat if we don't have those nice shadows and the shading moving to a highlight. Often the way you'll work before you start drawing is to prep your reference to best suit your drawing. And that'll mean playing around with curves, trying to get your shadows to look really dark, trying to get your highlights to be distinguished. And in this case, I think there's something we can do here to try and bring this out. So a helpful thing is to play around with your references. Okay, so let's bring the saturation down. I want to use curves to try and see where our highlights are. So what I'm doing here is just checking out the reference and working this to try and find what might make this look a little bit more exciting, lend itself to drawing a bit more. I'm going to very gently just darken this whole area. And the reason I'm doing this is just to try and get a bit of a differentiation between where there's shadow and where we'll be coming in with our highlights. It's really about looking for opportunities to do these kinds of things when you're drawing. So you're looking for your shadows because you know as soon as you find them, you'll be able to create a 3D shape, something that has a bit more volume. I'm going to go back in with an eraser. This is just a bare minimum tone that I've added on. You're just bringing out your highlights a little bit more. I've added absolutely no detail, and it brings quite a lot of shape into the dog's face. So this is something quite important to just remember in your artworks. If you can see that the image is a little bit difficult to identify where the highlights or where the shadows are, you can change them in any photo editing app. So it's worth getting to know your iPhone or Photoshop or whatever you're using. Almost all of these apps come with curves, and you can play around with them, get experimental, and work on your reference. You can really bring something to life and help find ways to make those highlights and shadows pop a bit more. So that's definitely something I think you can keep in mind. A way to apply this kind of toning with graphite would be with graphite powder and a brush. So you can use any kind of makeup brush. Those work really, really well. They're designed to move powder around, so they work pretty well with graphite. If you use a normal paintbrush, it's going to struggle a little bit. So give that a try. If you don't have brushes, you can use cotton wool as well. Get really soft tones, and you can bring those out with a kneadable eraser or a Tombow Mono Zero eraser. It's a little bit blunt using the tools that I have here, but using a Tombow Mono Zero eraser, you'll be able to even get the highlights of those hairs and bring out quite a lot of detail in this process as well. I'd advise not doing this after you've already done a lot of your drawing. This is more of a base level thing. So you do this before you start drawing those individual hairs. But if you've got a drawing and you've already done a lot of those individual hairs, a lot of that work, you can very lightly apply these shades and tones over and kind of work back and forth with bringing out these layers to give a richness and get those tonal values that you're looking for. And highlights. So highlights are super important. Graphite by nature is a fairly desaturated medium, so we really want to look for every opportunity to get those brights to pop and those shadows to be as dark and rich as possible. So a big part of helping your works have that contrast is to take care of your highlights, and that's often just as simple as keeping your page clean. But here we're taking a look at some of the critiques that focused on highlights. So Matthew drew one of the reference photos that I uploaded to the Patreon community a while ago, which is great because this is such a good drawing, and I think I'd need to look at the reference photo to really dig into the details of where you might be able to improve. The first thing that stands out to me, this area over here, if you were to darken the top of the lid, let's say this over here, if you were to darken that section a little bit more, it would give you the opportunity to really enhance those highlights. Just by darkening that area slightly, it gives you the opportunity for these highlights to just stand out a little bit more. So I'm obviously working on a tablet here, and because I'm going to be able to get sharper white, I'm just going to show you what those highlights can do. So having quite a sharp highlight here. Okay, I just want to toggle that and see what the look is. So it's a very rough thing, but it does kind of give it a little bit more depth. The thing is that you'd have to basically apply that tone across more of the drawing for it to really give the full illusion. But that's just a bit of an observation, is I would have preferred that to even be slightly darker, allowing you to get those richer tones. Overall, the thing that might be missing from the study would be in the highlight space. So your midtones and your darks are really fantastic, and I think this drawing would pop just a little bit more if your highlights were a little bit brighter. Just take a look here. Okay, so yeah, we've got the strong highlight there, got a bit of a highlight there, and then let's create a strong highlight there and there. Actually, what I think I'm going to do is just go for it, and let's just be brave and see what happens. Okay, and then there's a nice strong highlight here. Essentially, all I did here was I removed quite a lot of detail, but in favor of that overall shape, so in favor of bringing out a stronger highlight, and I think it actually might have been successful. So let's just take a look at what that does for the overall shapes of the pairs here. This isn't perfect. This was a very rudimentary or very rough edit of your work, but I think understanding how powerful those highlights can be in creating 3D shapes, it's really, really helpful. And hair. So hair has always been a really challenging one for a lot of us to draw. So we go through some tips and tricks in these critiques here, particularly with where to place the highlight on the hair to help it feel like it's got some volume or depth to it. And so for the next submission, we have Kyle. It's been really cool to see your progress. So we've still got your references that you sent through last time. So these two other eye drawings, and it's been really nice to see how your work has progressed. The detail that you're achieving now is definitely a lot better than where you were. The hair is a lot more detailed. I can see you using the embossing method, which is bringing it a little bit of that extra life. The thing I still want to see you do is the highlight on the individual hair strokes. So that's still something I think that could bring your work to the next level. So what we're talking about here is just a really small highlight on the curve of the hair, and it just helps the hair look a lot rounder. It's a subtle detail, but it can really make your hairs kind of stand out and look a lot more realistic. Let's just have a look here, how this impacts the work. You capture fur, but I think the way that you're hitting is really, really good. Another area that also kind of stands out to me is the hair over here. And the reason for that is because it's all kind of straight, and I can see in your reference that it's kind of muddled up with some highlights and things going the wrong way. And that's something with hair, is that there's often these loose strands that will, break the shape, break the pattern. We really need to try and avoid patterns as much as possible because they very seldom happen in nature, at least those, very strict patterns. I think look for those opportunities. Let's just quickly have a look. If I were to just draw a couple strands going the wrong way. Okay, and then similar to what I was saying in the previous work, hair has that highlight, it has that roundness. So let's just go into each of these and give it a bit of a highlight in a section to give it that roundness and that depth, giving it the illusion that it's catching the light and it's curved. So obviously it's a lot easier for me working on a tablet like this because I can get pure white, but these are things that you need to bear in mind when you're drawing. So you would use your eraser in a similar way here. Basically highlight an area and let the hair continue, or you draw this area knowing that you're going to draw hair here, and try and apply the graphite as soft as possible so that it allows you to get your highlight. Let's have a look. That adds a little bit of depth, adds some texture, some organic shapes to what was otherwise more like wiry, rigid hair. So that's another area that I really think you can improve on. What you asked me to pay attention to is the hair. So you've already started the hair on the left-hand side. And what we're struggling with here is that thing that I've spoken about a few times, is where we draw around a couple hairs and it ends up looking a little bit artificial and a little bit wiry. So that becomes really difficult. And the solution that I've started using is to focus on the larger shapes of the hair. So you're going to find a larger highlight, and then within that, very gently create small wisps of hair. And what we do is we attach that detail to that larger shape. What I'm doing now is just getting a bit of a base layer established and trying to work in a similar way to the way that we'd work with pencil. So she's got dark hair. I can't really remember what the reference looked like, but I'm going to try and show you what I mean here. And then we're going to take the eraser. We're going to view this area as a bit of a highlight. So the light is catching here. That's going to be our highlight. And then we're going to want little wisps of hair flowing through that. In this case, it's quite difficult because her hair is kind of perfect, so there's not a lot of shapes for us to really accentuate and show off our drawing skills. So the body of hair is really perfect. You're just going to create this larger shape here, but with that larger shape, you're going to want to have little strands that just suggest that there are tiny little hairs that are catching the light. And the idea here is that these hairs are breaking away from that larger pattern. That's going to give a slightly messier look, but it's going to just have that natural, the way that hair falls might not always be perfect, and it kind of tricks your mind into thinking that the entire body is made up of loads of tiny little strands. And then the next thing we can do is just to create little strands that are running off the larger volume of hair. And yeah, I mean, that's something you're already doing, but I think just being aware to include that in the larger volume is an opportunity you don't really want to miss out on. So let's just have a look at what that looks like. The other thing I think you can also pay attention to is the blending of the hair. So you can start using some cotton wool or a blending stump to try and smooth the pencil work there, which will just help you achieve more of the smooth effect that I've kind of gotten here. Of course, I'm using an iPad, and so that's a completely different medium. And there's a lot of things that are very easy to do on an iPad that are much harder to do with pencil. But what I love is that you are using your pencil primarily to get your shading. And I think that foundation is so crucial. Making small changes like this incrementally start making your works look more realistic, and it's about valuing these small details. It's really time consuming, and it might not feel like it adds as much, but it's the combination of a bunch of these small decisions to put the effort into these artworks that bring it collectively to the next level. And there we go. I hope these critiques were helpful. Going through some of the problems that artists have with their actual works is always a little bit more in-depth than just trying to explain it with a blank piece of paper in front of you. If you're interested in having your work critiqued, you can head over to Patreon and sign up there to have your work critiqued. Before I end this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to this video's sponsor, Squarespace. I've been working with them for a couple of years now, and they've played a huge role in my career, not only in sponsoring these videos and helping me maintain this channel, but more importantly, early on in my career, I was looking for a way to showcase my work. I didn't have time to learn HTML and to create a beautiful website that stayed updated and had all the tips and tricks of SEO and all of that. And I needed to find a way to showcase my work beautifully and simply and make it easy for clients to find me and get in touch with me. And I felt that Squarespace did that effortlessly. I never had to patch or upgrade anything. I could register a domain with them and set up an online store. And most importantly, I could design a portfolio and show my work the way that I wanted to. Also, every time I got stuck, their amazing support team helped me out instantly. So if you're looking at building a website, give Squarespace a try. And if you decide that you love them, use this offer code and get 10% off your first purchase. There we go. I hope that you found this helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I'll try and get back to as many of those as possible. If you did, leave a like. It helps the channel out in a huge way. As always, thanks for the support, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.